sports fans and Winding Road YouTube viewers. We're doing something a little bit different today. As you may know, I'm talking. We've decided to start to supplement some of our POV videos, which we're continuing to do, and we've already done the car I'm going to talk about today, with some discussion of some of the pros and cons of each car, because there's some stuff you just can't see from behind the wheel, and there's some stuff that frankly we don't think is necessarily being covered or covered completely in other venues. You will find that we're doing extensive coverage of the user interface and infotainment features of some cars, and today I'm going to talk to you about something near and dear to my heart: the 2022 Mini Cooper SE. And the E is very important because it's the full EV, no internal combustion engine version of the Mini Cooper. Is it possibly, maybe, really the best EV you can buy? So let's just go over a little bit of the Mini Cooper SE and give you some background on what it is. It's the basic, standard, familiar to everyone, two-door version, short wheelbase version of the Mini Cooper. It's the one you think of when you think Mini Cooper, unless you're thinking of the original one from the late 50s, early 60s. So it's the standard two-door version, 4 seats, room for 4 adults, although a little bit of pain to get in and out of the back seat. And it's much bigger than the original car, but it's still a small car. The EV version has several attributes that I want to talk about today that I think are very important and certainly put it in the running as the best EV on the planet. So, range is around 110 miles. I've driven this one extensively, and I can say after a full recharge, it generally shows 108 to 114 miles of range, and the data that is supplied on the dash is pretty accurate in terms of what I'm actually experiencing, and much of my commute is on highways at 75 miles an hour. If you know EVs, those high aerodynamic load situations, speeds above 60 miles an hour especially, take a real toll. So I think the 110-mile range is on the conservative side. The big thing is, many of you are thinking, 110 miles, couldn't possibly use that. Well, sure. Maybe yes, maybe no. This is not the car to drive long distances. But I want to suggest that most of you do almost all of your driving in a commuter situation, and your commute is 50 miles or less. So if your commute is 50 miles or less, you can go back and forth to work twice on one charge. That isn't how I would suggest using this car if you owned it. How you use it is you charge it at night in your garage. Let's assume you have a garage. There are lots of circumstances where this won't work. There are circumstances where an F-150 Lightning won't work. An F-150 Lightning is 232 inches long. That won't fit in some garages. So every car has its, it works here and it doesn't work there. Let's talk about where this does work, because I think it's actually the scenario that a lot of people face. So you come home, you plug it in, you charge it, only takes a few hours to charge, and you're ready to go the next morning. You drive your 40 or 50 miles round trip in your commute, you come home, you recharge it, you repeat. On weekends, you leave, you go run your errands, you come back, midday let's say, you plug it in and charge it. Oftentimes by the time you've had lunch, boom, you're ready to go and you're fully loaded. So maybe you could do 200 miles. 200 miles is quite a bit of driving. 100 miles, heck, is a lot of driving. And I think you will find, if you look at it, you very rarely go above that number. Secondly, most of you have 2 or 3 cars in the family, so there's a little bit over 1 car per person in the United States for people above the age of 16. So you probably are in a situation, not necessarily, but you probably are in a situation where you have access to other vehicles often easy access to other vehicles. And in those situations, boom, again, having a commuter car makes a heck of a lot of sense, and 110 miles is more than enough for many, many, many commutes. And it gives you some buffer on, hey, after work you have to go out for drinks with some colleagues, or you might have to go to dinner, you have to swing by the grocery store on the way home, or you have to stop at soccer practice, or whatever you might need to do. Plenty of extra range for most people under those circumstances. Okay, so I think for a lot of people, range isn't really an issue. So what makes this car good? Because range is certainly not what makes it good. I think the range is acceptable for a lot of people, but it's far from the winner in range, where you've got products like the Lucid Air and the Tesla Model S doing 400 and 500 miles of range with their biggest battery packs. So what makes this car good? All right. It's a combination of things. One, the car weighs 3,000 pounds. That is a very light EV, very light. That's 1,000 to 2,500 pounds less than many other EVs. That means traditional Mini handling is on offer. CG is probably lower, center of gravity is probably lower in this Mini than it is in Minis that have internal combustion engine. But at a minimum, it's approximately the same weight as a traditional Mini, and it handles like a traditional Mini, and that means the handling is really good, so it's just more fun to drive. Personally, I like Teslas. I've enjoyed a number of them, but Teslas are always kind of a luxury sedan-ish thing, because you know you're moving a huge mass around and you can feel it in the dynamic response of the car in turns. You may care about that, you may not care about it, but if you're looking for a sporting EV, there really aren't very many EV sports cars. In fact, it's kind of hard to think of one, but I'm going to say, look no further than this. You can buy a EV sports car that's lightweight, handles well, and is really fun to drive. On top of that, while Model S Plaid will annihilate this in 0 to 60 times, I don't know that it matters that much, because in reality on the street, you're not doing drag strip starts. I mean, you might do it occasionally to, get your friends excited if that's what they're into. But for the most part, you're not using 0 to 60 in 2-second kind of capability, because you don't need it, and because in certain circumstances it's pretty dangerous. This car, which is in the 5 to 6 second range in terms of 0 to 60 times, has plenty of that wonderful EV low-end torque punch. So you can accelerate quickly from stoplights, you can pull onto freeways, you can shoot the gap when you're making lane changes. It's just got what EVs have always excelled at, which is a combination of throttle response and low-end torque that makes the car very responsive and punchy to drive, well above its actual specifications. So, good handling, plenty of acceleration and responsiveness. And the third piece I want to point to is price. The $29,000 vehicle, $29,000. Does two things for you. One is you get a $7,500 tax credit from the federal government, so that goes against your tax bill. On top of that, many states, example Texas, will just send you $2,500 in cash for buying an EV. So it's entirely possible that a $30,000 Mini Cooper SE is actually $20,000 out the door, and for this much fun, that is a heck of a deal. When we're talking money, we also have to talk, and this is a great time to be talking about it, in a world of $5 gas, what kind of fuel mileage does this get? Well, it doesn't use fuel, so it's a little bit odd to talk about this, but let me walk through the math, because when you do the math, it's in the range of 150 miles per gallon. Yes, 150 miles per gallon. Let me tell you how I get there. This may bore you, apologies, but you kind of need to know. Electricity on average is 10 cents a kilowatt hour. This Mini Cooper SE, in a couple thousand miles of driving it, I've done a little over 4 miles per kilowatt hour. So if you do the conversion from 4 miles per kilowatt hour into miles per dollar, well, per dollar we're getting 40 miles because a kilowatt hour is 10 cents. So we're getting 40 miles per kilowatt or per dollar. And since gas is, let's say, $5 a gallon now, it depends on location and what grade of gas you're buying, but 5 is easy and we can do the math. We're getting 40 times 5, which is 200 miles, the equivalent of 200 miles per $5 or 200 miles per gallon. I add that the ability to plug in at night and recharge is a heck of a convenience. You never have to go to a gas station. So the economics of the car are pretty good. 29K knockoff, and maybe even 33K knockoff 10, so you're in a $23,000 car that gets 150 or 200 miles per gallon, which in 10,000 miles can save you quite a bit of money. I think it's a good deal. So there's sporty handling, really good acceleration, and I'll add one final thing, which is it won't go long distance, and it won't tow, and it doesn't have 4 doors, and it doesn't have a back seat. But honestly, if you wanted all that stuff, you could get pickup or a Kia Telluride for 50 grand, and the total amount of money you'd have in the whole thing is 70K. And a lot of you would go out and consider buying a plug-in hybrid like we can get from Range Rover or BMW or many other premium brands. And I think the combination of the Mini Cooper SE plus one of those vehicles probably solves your problem better than a combo vehicle, which is, you know, good at everything. They're nice cars, but you'll get, if you're lucky, you'll get 30 miles of EV range, and then you're back to paying $5 a gallon for fuel, and you don't have the low-end torque or throttle response that you have on this little guy, which you can drive every day with a smile on your face. So my answer is, for people who live in urban situations and are mainly commuters and have access to a second car or maybe a third car, this is a great option because it's really fun to drive and it's really, really economical. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion of the 2022 Mini Cooper SE. I hope you'll click to subscribe. I hope you'll come back and watch more of these, and also check in for our coverage of the infotainment system on this car and on other cars that we'll be covering in the near future. Thanks.